Hi again, welcome to the wonderful world of model horses, of course, unboxing. I have no idea what we've got this week, so it'll be interesting. And our box is labeled Breyer, Donkeys, and Mules. Box number 4 should be fun. Let's find out what's in it. First, we have a model called Brown Sunshine. This is also called the traditional saddle mule. I actually remember being at the Breyer Fest. I think that this one was released at, I'm going to say 95, 96. That era was kind of a time when Breyer was doing a lot of releases and discontinuing, so I think this model in this color only ran for maybe a year or two. Just a nice kind of apricot dun color. Not a lot of details. He does have, if you look closely, what's called bi eyes. Remember last week we had tri eyes, this week's bi eyes. He has black and he has just a little bit of brown accenting the eyes, which is not something they did to all the models all the time, so that is something collectors look for. Just a really nice clean model, Brown Sunshine. First, let's see what's next. This is also the Brown Sunshine mold. This one, however, is unpainted. Sometimes you could get unpainted models from Breyer as this way. So the model actually was sold unpainted. And some people will strip them of their original finish factory paint. And that actually does affect what the collectors think of the model, whether or not they are interested in it. If it's been stripped, it's considered custom. If it came from the factory with no paint on it, it's considered original finish. It's really, really, really difficult to be able to strip absolutely every little. Breyer does a really beautiful job of manufacturing really durable finish paint jobs, so it's very hard to get all of the paint off of every nook and cranny. This one, I don't see any. Like you look in the little cracks of the ankle, the little ruffles of the mane and tail. This one doesn't have a mane, he's cropped. But I really don't see any potential remnants of paint, so I am going to venture the guess that this was actually released this way, which would make him, if he is original finish, have to do a little bit of research. But in the meantime, collectors will keep these unpainted as original finish, or if you strip them, you can repaint them. So different things that people will do with their models. Model number 2, what's up next? I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do about this because I have a sneaking suspicion the rest of the box is going to be full of brighties and standing donkeys. So I think I'm just going to unpack for a minute or two and talk about what I unpack. And then we'll get into a little bit more detail. So this mold is called Bridie because that was originally what he was sculpted after, was Bridie of the Grand Canyon, who was a mule that lived in and around the Grand Canyon and was immortalized in the Marguerite Henry tale, Bridie of the Grand Canyon. Very popular. And that looks like all the Bridies that I have for right now. You can see they're all fairly similar. I am not a Bridie collector, so I will do my best with what I have to work with. They were introduced, I believe, early 70s, 73, 74, produced in the original paint job for a good 10, 15, 20 years, quite some time, at least through the mid-late 80s. And the original paint job was just a very nice shaded gray. You will occasionally find them with a little accent. Again, I don't know how it shows up on video, but he'll have a dorsal stripe where they'll spray a little bit of accent color on the dorsal stripe and down the shoulders. And then this one has that detail. This is just a very plain light gray. The other interesting thing about this mold, sometimes you can find chalkies. So this is definitely not going to show up on video, and maybe I'll post some links in the description. But chalkies, basecoat chalkies, were made in, cast in usually an unusual colored plastic. Then they have a white coat of paint over the top of them to clear out that, level out that surface, and then they'll have another layer of paint over the top of them. So this is a base coat chalky Brighty. You can tell it in where the paint rubs off and in the spaces where you can actually see the white. You can see that it's a chalkier looking white. The original Breyer plastic is pretty translucent. So when you see that real bright white, that's the sign that it's probably a painted color. So the other Brighty that we have here, I think is a later release. He has brown on his hocks down here. He is definitely an overall browner shade. And again, he has the bi eyes where it's black with a little bit of brown accent, which really didn't come into vogue until the 90s, outside of the original eye white era. But so this tells me that this model was a later issue, probably mid 90s. And these guys, I'm guessing, were all original. This is just a very nice shaded gray. This variation has the dorsal stripe and the little accent on the shoulders. And this is a base coat chalky. Variation collector who likes to collect different variations within the mold would definitely keep all of these because they are significantly different when you're standing and looking at them in person. And they can be talked about in different eras. So I can identify when a chalky was produced, when they did a little more detailed paint job, again, when they did the little added detail to make the bi eyes. So all of these models are looking like they are pretty different variations. And again, this one's a little later release in the 90s. So all the same mold, the Brighty mold, and one different release and a couple of original releases. The next models look, again, I'm just opening these up, looking through the bubble wrap. They look like standing donkeys. These guys were produced, I'm thinking, in the mid-60s, in the original color, and I really don't think they did much outside of the regular gray that you see here, unless it was very recently. They're going to be almost all very, very similar colors of gray. Very descriptive, standing donkey mold. And the differences that you're going to see is differences in painters. So all these models are hand painted in the Breyer factory. Lately, in the last 10-15 years, they've been shipped to China, but they are all hand painted. So depends on if it's a new painter, an old painter, if it was Monday morning at 8 a.m. or whether it was 5 o'clock Friday night, you could get some significant differences and across the years. This mold was produced for a long period of time and re-released in the, I believe, 1976 election and 1992, but their version of re-release is paint them in the same color and put them in a different box. So once you unbox them, you really have fewer clues as to when they were released. So, this is the first time I've looked at these guys. I'm going to say we have got one base coat chalky. He's got very bright white on his ankles. When I flip him over, you would be able to see, if you were sitting here and looking at him in person, you could definitely see the brighter white than the translucent white plastic. Some of these guys can be cast in gray plastic, which I'll get to in a minute. He has definite white shading, or white you can see standing out from underneath that gray paint on his muzzle. So this guy is a base coat chalky. And this guy is cast in a more gray plastic. If you compare him to his brethren, he definitely has a different shade to his plastic than that white translucent, and that was a variation. They actually don't have, this guy didn't get his eyes painted. It's hard to tell on this fairly undetailed paint job. This guy had his eyes painted, this guy did not, and these two appear to have their eyes painted. These two are also very dark variations, almost a charcoal black variation to them. no other detailing. You'll occasionally see what's called a bay variation, where they amped up the color variation when they were shading him. But these two are very similar in their dark, almost charcoal color. This guy's got the gray to his plastic, and then we have a base coat chalky. Oh, and the gray guy doesn't have his eyes painted, which we do not mark down against. It's just a variation that a collector would note and say that is something that that model has or does not have. If I was a collector, I would definitely keep all of these variations, and I actually think I have all these variations on my shelf, including the Brighties, because how can you get rid of him? This guy's a chalky, that one's gray plastic, this one's... Collectors, we enjoy these little tiny details. So that's all that was in the box this week. A little more cohesive group of models, but a very interesting one for some detail to the collector mind. I hope you enjoyed it, and I have no idea, but we'll see what's on tap for next week. Thank you very much.